And we want to welcome you back to First Christian Church of Glasgow to the Sunday school class. And for this Sunday, we're going to be again talking about Abraham, along here with my trusty helper, Clementine. We're going to kind of tell you the story of how Abraham's name changed and how that came about and how he got the name of Abraham. And if you're wondering why my letters are backwards on this video, it's just because the way the phones work or whatever, it's kind of weird. It's a reverse image, so everything's kind of backwards from what it really looks like, so that's kind of neat. So, but we are going to be looking at Genesis 16, so if you do have your Bible, you want to turn, you by now, if you've been working in your book notebook, you should be able to find Genesis chapter 16. It begins, the title of it is The Birth of Ishmael. Genesis is the very first book of the Bible, and the 16th chapter. We're actually going to look through several chapters today, go through 16, 17, and part of 18. Now, Clementine, you can't play with my strings during the lesson, okay? She likes the little strings on the thing. Yeah, okay. So, in any event, I'm kind of curious. Well, now you're laying on my notes. Okay, come on now. Let's move you over. All right. There we go. Anyway, so has God ever, or anyone ever asked you to wait for something and you got a little impatient and went ahead and did it anyway before you should have, and that kind of got you in a little bit of trouble? Well, that's what today's lesson is going to be about with Abram. Again, he's not Abraham yet. So Abram, as you know, God has been promising him a child for years now. It's just been going on. It seems like a lot of lessons. I know, a lot of years. And Abram's like, come on now, I really want a child. And that's how, it was really a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal today. It was maybe even a bigger deal back then. And so Abraham and Sarah, of course, Sarah wanted his wife, or her name at that time was Sarai, and she wanted a child too, and that was very important to her. And the fact that she and Abraham didn't have any was just so upsetting to them. And even though God had been promising Abram a child, they finally got so impatient that Sarah told Abraham that, Sarah had a servant that was working for her, and she was younger, and Sarah told Abram, hey, I want you to marry my servant girl, and I want you to have a child with her. Like, wow, okay. I'm sure Abraham was a little surprised by that, but you know what? He didn't say no, and sure enough, that's what happened. The servant girl's name was Hagar, and so Abraham took Hagar as his second wife, which apparently was not that uncommon back then to have more than one wife. I know that sounds strange nowadays. That's not really what we do nowadays, but back then it wasn't uncommon. And sure enough, Hagar became pregnant, and she had a son, bore a son. And through God's command, Hagar named the son Ishmael. Well, I think Sarai had a little buyer's remorse. She was regretting that she had told Abraham to marry her servant too. And so she was starting to be kind of mean to Hagar and Hagar's son. And she was so mean that Hagar and the son ran away with her son into the desert. Of course, there's not too many places to run away. If you remember our geography in that area, in that Israel, there's a lot of desert there. And so they ran away, and as they were sitting and resting God came to Hagar. Whether he came through an angel, a voice, we're not really sure. But he asked Hagar to go back. He understood why she ran away, but he wanted her to go back and to be part of the family because he had a plan. He had a plan for Ishmael. He had a plan for Hagar. And so, to Hagar's credit, she listened to God and she did go back, even though it was a very uncomfortable situation. And she endured, there was nothing in the Bible to suggest she deserved the treatment she got, but nonetheless, she went back. And then the story changes back to Abram talking to God, and God once again reaffirming his covenant with Abram, that he would bring him a son and that he would be the father and grandfather of many, many people and many nations. And God decided to give Abram another symbol. Last week we talked about the covenant cutting ceremony where they cut the animals in half and the torch and the fire pot went through it, and as a symbol of God's covenant. Well, God gives another covenant to Abram in this chapter. I think it's chapter 17. And he says, Abram, I'm going to change your name. You from now on will be known as Abraham. And I'm going to change Sarai's name to Sarah. And that's a symbol of my promise that I'm going to keep it. And you're going to have a son. As a matter of fact, God told him he's going to name his son Isaac. And that Isaac would be the father or grandfather of 12 princes, 12 male leaders, princes, which is interesting. It's a prophecy that it turns out it comes true a few years later, many years later. But we'll get into that later. Just remember those 12 princes. We'll get into that. That's kind of an interesting prophecy that God told Abraham now. So he changes his name. And then the story turns, some time passes, no child still yet. And we see that Abraham now is kind of hanging out by his tent. And Mabry is the name of the city. It's kind of in central Israel, by a tree. And he's hanging out there and he sees, in his tent, he sees these three men walking by. And of course, Abram's a decent bloke, so he invites the guys to stop by and get some food and water. And they agree. And so he asked him just to wait by the tree, and he asked Sarah if she would make something for him. And she said, yeah, sure. And so she makes some bread and gets some water, and Abraham takes it out to him. And then the three men started talking to Abraham. And, you understand, Abraham and Sarah are really old now. And we realize that these three men are more than just men. We realize they're angels because they start talking to Abraham. You are going to have a child now very soon, you and Sarah. And you're going to name him Isaac. And apparently Sarah was eavesdropping inside the tent, kind of had her ear to it, trying to listen to what was going on. And when she heard that these men said that Abraham and Sarah, she was going to have a child, she kind of laughed to herself, or I don't know if it was out loud or whatever. But the men, or these angels, asked Sarah, why did you laugh? And then she was embarrassed. She's like, oh, I didn't laugh. I don't know what you're talking about. It was the goats. They laughed. No, she didn't say that, but I'm sure she was thinking it. And then the angels were like, oh, yes, you did laugh. Like, oops. So awkward. It's like that Southwest Airline commercial, want to get away? I'm sure that's how Sarah felt at that point in time. And but in any event, it turned out they made that promise to her, and so it was going to be, it was coming really soon. And then these three men, that's when the story ends. And I guess our lesson today is this, and it's a hard one, we are, when God makes a promise to us, or maybe even our parents make a promise to us, our grandparents, or family members, or guardians, we need to wait on that. They will keep their promise to us. God will keep his promises to you. It may not be as fast as we want, in the time frame that we want. We will grow impatient, but we are to wait on God in his timing, for it is perfect. He knows all, sees all, and understands all, and we need to trust in that, even when it's frustrating and aggravating, even when we have doubts. We are to stand firm in our belief in God and know that he will keep all of his promises. And in the same way, we should wait on our parents and our guardians, for they too will keep their promises in the right time. We may not understand all the rules and things like that, but we need to trust them that they're looking out for our best interests. So let's talk about our workbook, Finding Your Way Through the Bible. If you don't have this workbook, I hope you will text either me or Ann, or get in church or in contact with the church at the church office, and we will make sure you get one. It won't be that hard to catch up if you're behind. We're up to page 77 right now, but the pages are short, so feel free, if you don't have one, to get one. It's a great exercise on learning how to use this Bible and understand it. Sometimes it's just so confusing and scary to people, just so many books, so many numbers and things that you don't even want to start. And this is a great way to learn how to start. And so if you have been working through it, we're going to be starting with page 77. And we're going to just work through page 82 today. And that's going to be a lot more practice. And it's going to instruct you on how we actually write down, like the books of the Bible, a chapter and verse. So if you actually see it written, you would understand what it's actually saying and how to find it. And it's going to give you some practice tips on how to find certain books and chapters and verses of the Bible. So pages 77 through 82. I hope that you will have a wonderful week. I hope that you will be patient when God calls for you to be patient. And I hope you will love when God calls you to love. Until next week, God bless you, and hope to see you soon.